It's cold here, colder than anything I've ever felt before. They say Alaska is the last frontier, but what they don't tell you is that there's something far darker out there. I'm lucky to be here today, but I've seen things I can't forget. I never thought I'd be the one telling this story, but here I am. If you're listening, I just need you to understand that this is real. Everything I'm about to tell you, it happened, and it almost cost me my life. I was out there, in the middle of nowhere, with nothing but the endless expanse of snow surrounding me. This wasn't your typical tourist trap. I wasn't on some guided fishing trip or hiking through some serene national park. No, I was with a group of experienced hunters, men who'd spent their entire lives in the harshest of conditions. Their names were Eric, Tom, and Scott, and they were the real deal. If anyone could survive the Alaskan wilderness, it was these guys. But we made a mistake. We shouldn't have gone out there. It was just supposed to be a quick hunting trip. Nothing too crazy. We'd been tracking an elusive moose for days, deep in the forests outside Anchorage. But on that third night, something felt off. We were camped in a clearing, the moon hanging like a pale ghost in the sky, and all of a sudden, I felt it. A pressure, like the air had thickened, like something unseen was watching us. I tried to ignore it at first. It wasn't like me to get paranoid, but there was a strange stillness in the air. The snow was too quiet. No rustling of wind, no chirping of birds, just the eerie silence. The others hadn't noticed yet, too focused on the fire and their stories about past hunts. But then it happened. A sound, faint at first, then growing louder. A slow, deliberate crunching of snow, like something big was moving through the woods. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice coming out harsher than I intended. Scott paused, his hand halfway to his beer, and his eyes darted toward the edge of the trees. Eric and Tom stopped talking too, the atmosphere shifting from casual to tense in an instant. "It's probably just a bear or a moose," Eric said, shrugging it off. But it wasn't. The sound was too methodical, too deliberate. It wasn't an animal, at least not one we were familiar with. Then we saw it. A figure, tall, thin, almost skeletal, standing at the edge of the clearing. Its silhouette was impossible to miss against the stark white of the snow, but what struck me the most was the way it moved. It was jerky, unnatural, like it was being pulled by strings, its limbs too long for its body. And the face, I'll never forget the face. It was distorted, almost alien in its features, like it had once been human but had twisted into something else. I don't know how long we stared at it. Felt like an eternity. But then, as suddenly as it appeared, it disappeared back into the forest, vanishing without a sound. Tom was the first to speak. "What the hell was that?" We didn't know. It was Eric who suggested we pack up and leave. But as we gathered our things, a deep, bone-chilling howl echoed through the trees, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. This wasn't the howl of a wolf or a coyote. This was something worse. Something that echoed through your chest, shaking you to your core. I've never been the type to panic, but in that moment, I felt the terror grip me. It wasn't just the howl that terrified me. It was the way everything had gone still again, as if the world itself had gone silent, waiting. That night, as we huddled together in the tents, I could hear the crunch of snow outside again. This time, it wasn't just one thing. It was multiple shapes circling us, drawing closer. I swear I heard whispers on the wind. The voices were incomprehensible, just distorted sounds that crawled into your mind and made your thoughts run wild. Tom wanted to go out to confront whatever was out there, but I knew better. I could feel the presence. This wasn't something we could fight. It was hunting us. The next morning, we tried to leave, but our tracks had vanished. All those hours of trudging through the snow, marking our path, only to find it wiped away like we had never passed through. The forest had swallowed us whole. We weren't just lost, we were trapped. I don't know how long we were out there, but I remember the panic setting in. We hadn't seen any more figures, but that didn't matter. The feeling that something was watching, waiting, never left. Every crack of a twig, every rustle in the bushes, made our hearts skip a beat. We made it out barely. By the time we stumbled back to civilization, I was covered in frostbite, half dead from hunger and exhaustion. I never spoke to Tom or Scott again. Eric didn't make it back. They found his body a week later, in the exact spot where we'd last seen that thing. But it wasn't just his body that was found. His eyes, they were wide open, frozen in terror. But the worst part? There were no tracks leading to him. It was as if whatever had killed him had just appeared out of thin air. I don't know what we encountered out there, but I know one thing for sure. It was waiting for us. And it's still out there, somewhere in the Alaskan wilderness, waiting for the next group of fools to wander into its domain. If you ever go to Alaska, remember this story. Stay on the path. Never stray from the group. Because once you hear that howl, you may not make it out alive. The last thing I remember is the sound of the wind carrying something with it. Whispers, maybe, or something else. But I'll never forget it. I survived, but not without a price. Now, every time I close my eyes, I hear that howl again. I thought I could leave it behind. I really did. For months after we made it back to Anchorage, I tried to convince myself that what happened in those woods was just some bizarre, shared hallucination. Maybe it was the isolation, the exhaustion, or the sheer terror that made our minds play tricks on us. But as the months wore on, I began to realize something. I hadn't truly escaped. Started small. A nightmare here, a lingering sensation there, like I was being followed. But it wasn't until I received a call that I knew something wasn't right. It was late, maybe 2 or 3 in the morning. I was staying in a small cabin outside of Fairbanks, trying to rebuild my life after everything had happened. My phone rang, the shrill tone cutting through the quiet night like a knife. I almost didn't answer, but something in my gut told me I should. "Hello," I answered, my voice rough with sleep. "Ben?" The voice on the other end was crackling, almost distorted, but I could tell who it was right away. It was Scott. "Scott? What's going on?" I asked, sitting up straight in bed. His voice sounded panicked, frantic in a way I hadn't heard in him before. "You're still in Alaska, right? Still near the woods?" he asked, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Yeah, I'm not far from Fairbanks. Why? What's wrong?" He was silent for a moment before he spoke again, his voice trembling. "I saw it. It's real, Ben. It's real, and it's not just out there in the wilderness. It's here. It's in the city." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. My breath hitched in my chest as I tried to process his words. "Scott, what the hell are you talking about? What did you see?" He paused again, like he was trying to find the right words. But when he finally spoke, the terror in his voice was undeniable. "I saw it in the woods last night. I thought it was gone, that we had escaped. But it's been following me, Ben. It's not just some monster. It's a force. It's like it's drawn to me. I don't know how much longer I can outrun it." I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line, and I knew something was seriously wrong. "Scott, calm down. You need to tell me exactly what happened. Where are you?" "I'm in my house," he said, his voice shaking. "But I'm not alone, Ben. I'm not alone." Suddenly, the line went dead. I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, numb with disbelief. I didn't know what to think. I had lived through it, but hearing Scott's panic, hearing his terror, made me feel like I was right back there, lost in those woods again. The same haunting feeling settled into my chest. Something was still out there. I grabbed my coat and rushed out of the cabin. I didn't know what I was going to find, but I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. My feet barely touched the ground as I drove toward Scott's place in a daze. The snow was falling heavily, and the headlights of my truck cut through the blizzard like a knife through fog. It took me nearly 2 hours to get to his house. By the time I pulled up to the cabin, the place was dark. Too dark. No lights. No movement. I stepped out of the truck, the cold air biting into my skin, and walked to the front door. It was ajar just slightly, as if someone had left it that way in a hurry. My heart pounded in my chest as I pushed the door open, the old wood creaking under the pressure. "Scott," I called, my voice echoing in the silence. No answer. I stepped further into the cabin, the smell of stale air and something metallic filling my nostrils. As I entered the living room, I froze. The entire room was covered in deep red streaks, as if someone had painted the walls with blood. But it wasn't the blood that caught my attention. It was the figure standing in the corner of the room. It was tall, too tall, with limbs that were bent at unnatural angles. Its face was a twisted nightmare of sharp angles and black, hollow eyes, staring straight at me. The thing didn't move at first, but I could feel its presence, suffocating the air around me. Then it made a sound, a low, guttural hum, almost like a song, but it wasn't a song of peace. It was something darker, something older. I backed away, my mind racing. "Scott!" I screamed, but there was no answer. The thing took a step forward, its long, unnerving arms reaching toward me. I ran, heart pounding in my chest, but as I reached the door, I turned back to see it standing there, just watching me. And then it spoke. "I'm not finished with you." The words weren't spoken aloud. They echoed in my mind, vibrating through my skull like a warning. The cold air seemed to freeze in place around me, and I knew in that moment that whatever this thing was, it was after more than just us. I ran out of the cabin, stumbling through the snow, not looking back until I reached my truck. I didn't know if Scott was alive or dead, and in some twisted way I didn't want to know. What I did know was that the creature from the woods wasn't just a thing that lived in the forest. It had followed us here. It had followed me. It's still out there somewhere waiting, and I don't think it's done with me yet. I don't know why I'm still here. I should have left. I should have packed up everything and gotten out of Alaska for good. But something, maybe it's guilt, maybe it's some twisted form of unfinished business, keeps me here. Every time I think about leaving, I hear that whisper. It's not a voice. It's the wind, but it feels like a voice. It feels like it's calling my name. It's the same voice I heard in the woods that night, the one that never left my thoughts. And I know deep down that it's still out there waiting. After what happened at Scott's cabin, I didn't go to the police. Couldn't. I didn't know what to say. How do you explain something like that to people who would never believe you? Who would laugh and dismiss it as some wild hallucination from too much time in the wilderness? So I kept it to myself, tried to move on, tried to convince myself that I was the only one left to carry the weight of what we'd seen. But then came the phone call. It was about 3 weeks later, the dead of winter. The days were short, and the nights felt endless. I was sitting in a diner in Fairbanks, nursing a cup of coffee and trying to pretend I wasn't haunted by the things I'd witnessed. The storm outside howled against the windows, but I barely noticed anymore. The storm inside me was far worse. That's when my phone rang again. I froze. It was a number I didn't recognize, but something in my gut told me to pick up. "Hello." I answered, my voice shaky, though I didn't know why. "Ben." It was Eric's voice. I hadn't heard from Eric since we'd left the wilderness. After everything that happened, he'd gone back to his family in the lower 48. He had stopped returning my calls, and I'd figured he wanted to forget about it all, just like everyone else. But here he was calling me after all this time. "Eric? What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep the panic out of my voice. Ben, I don't know how to say this, but..." Eric's voice cracked, and for the first time since I'd known him, I heard fear in his tone. It made my blood run cold. "It's back. It found me." I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest like a stone. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't want to tell you," he continued, his voice barely audible. "But it's been following me too. I thought I could outrun it, but it's everywhere now. It's in my house, it's in my dreams. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. I can feel it getting closer. I think... God, Ben, I think it wants to take me next." I could barely breathe. The same thing, the same horrifying thing that had stalked us in the Alaskan woods, was now tormenting Eric. It was no longer confined to the wilderness. It was everywhere, and it was getting closer. "I'm coming to you," I said without thinking. I didn't know how, but I knew I couldn't let him face this alone. "No," Eric gasped, his voice strained. "Don't come here. You don't understand. You don't know what it's like when it gets close. You won't survive it, Ben. I just wanted to warn you. You can't escape it. It's not just in the woods. It's in everything now. It's in your mind. It knows who you are. His words made my skin crawl, but there was something in them that broke through my panic. A deep, almost desperate plea. What do you mean? I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know how to explain it, he said, his voice shaking with fear. But once it's latched onto you, it doesn't let go. You can run, you can hide, but it's always there, watching, waiting for you to slip up. I was shaking, my hands trembling as I held the phone to my ear. Eric, where are you? I need to see you. We need to figure this out together. I'm at my cabin, he said, his voice barely audible now. But Ben, please don't come. Don't. And then the line went dead. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the phone in my hand, my mind racing. It wasn't like Eric to panic. He was one of the toughest men I'd ever met. But hearing the fear in his voice, the way he begged me not to come, it told me everything I needed to know. Whatever this thing was, it was getting worse. And it wasn't just haunting us anymore. It was feeding on our fear, and it was closing in. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my jacket, paid the bill, and rushed out of the diner. The storm outside was worse than it had been all night, but I couldn't wait. Eric was out there, alone, and I wasn't gonna let him face this thing by himself. It took me hours to get to his cabin. By the time I arrived, the wind was howling, and snow was falling in thick, impenetrable sheets. I pulled up to the cabin, my headlights cutting through the swirling snow, but there was no sign of Eric. I called his name, my voice barely audible over the storm, but there was nothing. I forced the door open, the wood creaking under the weight of the snow, and stepped inside. The place was dark, except for a small candle burning in the corner. It flickered weakly, casting eerie shadows across the room. The air was thick, too thick, like it was filled with something unnatural. And then I saw it. At the far end of the cabin, standing by the window, was a figure. Tall, thin, unmistakable. It was the same thing I'd seen in the woods, the same thing that had stalked us. It wasn't just watching me, it was waiting. But what made my blood freeze was the sight of Eric, crumpled on the floor beneath it, his eyes wide open in terror, frozen in a way I couldn't explain. The thing turned its head slowly, its face twisted in a grotesque mockery of a smile. And then it spoke. You should have stayed away, Ben. Before I could react, the door slammed shut behind me, and I felt the cold, suffocating weight of it surround me. The whispers started, low at first, then rising in volume, filling my mind with words I couldn't understand, like the wind itself was alive. And then I knew. It wasn't just hunting us anymore. It was consuming us, and it was going to take us all. I don't know how much time passed after the thing spoke. It felt like seconds, but then again, it felt like hours. All I could hear was the sharp, oppressive sound of my own breathing, mixed with the unnerving hum coming from that thing, standing just a few feet away, its form stretching unnaturally against the flickering candlelight. Its hollow eyes pierced into me, empty voids that seemed to know everything about me. Things I hadn't even remembered myself. I could barely move. My body had frozen, not from the cold but from the terror that gripped every inch of me. My legs were heavy, like they were made of lead, and my arms hung useless at my sides, as if the very act of reaching for something, anything, would have been futile. All I could do was stare at the thing, helpless. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was studying me, as if deciding whether I was worth the effort of tormenting further. The cabin felt smaller, suffocating, the air thick and bitter. The wind howled outside, but in here, there was only silence. A deafening, oppressive silence. Then I heard it. The sound of Eric's voice, weak, raspy, barely a whisper. Ben, get out. It's not too late. I turned my head, finally finding the strength to look at him, lying on the floor. His face was pale, eyes wide open but empty, staring at something beyond me, as if he were already lost to whatever this thing was. He didn't seem to be breathing. I knew then. Eric was already gone. The thing moved then, stepping closer. Each movement was slow, deliberate, and I could hear the soft creaking of its bones as if they were made of wood. It stopped in front of me, and I could feel its presence invade every corner of my mind. "I told you not to come," it said again, its voice a whisper and a scream at the same time. "Now, you belong to me." Before I could react, it reached toward me with one long, twisted arm. Its fingers, if you could even call them fingers, were sharp, talon-like, scraping the air between us. I could feel the cold radiating from them, a cold that went deeper than the skin, burrowing into my very soul. I stumbled backward, the horror overwhelming me, but I couldn't move fast enough. The air seemed to slow down, and I felt like I was trapped in some twisted dream, unable to wake up. It was all around me. Its presence, its words, its touch. I felt its fingers brush my cheek, and in that moment, I was sure it would drag me into the same frozen nightmare that had taken Eric. But then something changed. I don't know how or why, but the pain, the suffocating weight of the thing's touch, faded. I don't know if it was my will to survive or something else entirely, but I managed to break free. I bolted toward the door, every step heavier than the last, the darkness closing in around me, whispering in my ears, urging me to stay, to give in. But I couldn't stop. I had to get out. I had to survive. I didn't look back as I ran, crashing through the snow, the storm battering me from every side. I could feel it, though, the pull of it, the weight of its presence still lingering in the air, chasing me even though I was miles away from that cursed cabin. I don't know how I managed to make it back to my truck. The snow was falling heavier than ever, and I could barely see through the windshield. I slammed the door shut, locked it, and started the engine. I shouldn't have looked back, but I did. The cabin was gone. There was nothing left but the storm, the swirling white madness of it. The wind screamed like a living thing, howling its fury into the void. But through the blizzard, I could make out a figure standing by the road, just barely visible, its form bent and broken. The same twisted thing. I don't know how it followed me. I don't know how it found me in the storm, but it did. It was always there, waiting, watching. As I drove, I felt its presence following me, not in the truck, but in my mind. The whispers were louder now, clearer, echoing through every thought I tried to have. It was inescapable. I kept my eyes on the road, the world a blur of white. I drove for what felt like hours, the fear gnawing at my mind. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't breathe without feeling its weight on my chest. The thing had followed me, and no matter how far I went, no matter where I ran, it would always be there, just out of sight, watching. By the time I reached the nearest town, I was too far gone. I had seen too much, felt too much, and I knew, deep in my bones, that it wasn't over. It would never be over. Not for Eric, not for me, and certainly not for anyone else foolish enough to think they could outrun it. I moved away shortly after that. I never stayed in one place for too long. I kept to the cities, the crowds, hoping the noise would drown out the whispers in my mind. But I know now. I know what I didn't understand before. The thing, whatever it was, isn't just a creature. It's not bound by the laws of nature or time. It feeds on fear, it feeds on the dark corners of your mind, and it follows you. It doesn't need to be in the woods. It can be anywhere. And that thought, it's always with me. Because no matter how far I run, it's still out there, somewhere, waiting for me. Waiting for the next person to wander too far off the path. Waiting for the next soul it can claim. And this time, I don't think I'll be able to outrun it. I wish I could say that moving away, leaving Alaska behind, somehow broke the curse. That I found peace, that the whispers faded, that I was finally free. But I wasn't. The thing, I can't even call it a creature anymore, wasn't just something confined to a specific place or time. It was like a shadow, an inescapable part of me, of my mind. I would hear it in the middle of the night, the cold air pressing against my skin even in the warmth of my new apartment. The whispers didn't just come from the dark corners of rooms anymore. They came from inside me. They twisted my thoughts until I could no longer tell where my fear ended and where it began. It started to affect my sleep, then my relationships. I couldn't keep a job. I couldn't keep a friend. How could I? When the only thing that filled my thoughts was the thing I'd seen in Alaska, the thing that haunted me with every breath I took. I tried everything. Therapy, meditation, medication. Nothing helped. Because no matter what I did, I couldn't escape it. And then, it happened again. It had been a year since I'd left Alaska, and I thought I was getting better. I was in a small town in Montana now, trying to rebuild some semblance of a life, far from the frozen wilderness that still haunted me. I was in a small apartment above a local diner, just another stranger trying to outrun his past. But the nightmares never stopped. They were getting worse. I woke up one night, drenched in sweat, the scream of the wind outside carrying the same eerie, haunting tone that had plagued me since that first night in the Alaskan wilderness. My body was trembling, but I forced myself out of bed, trying to shake off the feeling of dread that clung to me like a second skin. That's when I saw it. There was something in the corner of the room. I had no idea how it had gotten there, no idea when it had arrived. The shadows of the room seemed to twist and bend around it, as if the very air had contorted to accommodate its presence. At first, I thought it was a hallucination, the product of a mind too far gone. But then I saw it, those long, twisted limbs, the way the figure stood unnaturally tall, its silhouette unmistakable. Its face was a blur, just a mass of darkness where features should have been, but I could feel it. I could feel it staring at me, the hollow, vacant eyes, the coldness that chilled my very soul. I froze. For the first time since that night in Alaska, I couldn't move, couldn't scream. The fear was so intense, so paralyzing, that it wrapped itself around me, suffocating any thought of escape. The thing stepped closer. The floor creaked under its weight, though there was no weight to it, not really. It was like it was a part of the air itself, an entity made of darkness and frost, slowly moving toward me with a strange, purposeful slowness. Couldn't breathe. It spoke then, its voice like 1,000 whispers woven together into one soul-chilling sound. "You can't outrun me, Ben. You can't run from what you are." I could hear the words in my head, louder than the sound of the wind outside. It wasn't talking about Alaska anymore. It was talking about me. The thing had seen something in me, something it could latch onto. It had marked me long ago. I tried to back away, but my body wouldn't obey. The fear was too much. My heart was pounding in my chest like it was about to explode, but nothing happened. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. And then it reached out its hand. No, its claw, long and cold, brushing against my skin. I felt a searing, biting cold where its fingers touched me. My whole body screamed for me to pull away, to fight, but I couldn't. The moment it made contact, I felt the memories flood back. The forest, the snow, the moonlit sky, the thing in the darkness, watching us, waiting for us to make the wrong move. It wasn't just a monster, I realized. It was something older, something that existed long before the trees and the snow, before the stars and the sun. It was a presence, a force that consumed not just your body, but your mind. It fed off your fear, and it fed off the very idea of escape. But as its cold fingers gripped tighter, I did the only thing I could think to do. I fought. I didn't think about it. I didn't plan it. But I gathered every ounce of strength I had, and I pulled away. Not physically, I couldn't do that, but mentally. I fought it with every thought, every memory of what I had survived, what I had already gone through. I remembered the woods. I remembered the howling wind. I remembered Scott, Eric, the terror. And with everything I had, I reached into the darkness. I don't know how it happened. Maybe I just willed it. Maybe it was a desperate cry for survival, a last-ditch attempt to tear myself away from the abyss. But as I reached into the thing, I felt the coldness begin to recede, slowly, just for a moment. The thing in front of me flickered, like a shadow at the edge of your vision, unsure of its form, of its purpose. The moment lasted only a second, but that second was all I needed. I slammed my eyes shut and forced myself to breathe. I kept thinking of the one thing that kept me alive in Alaska: survival. When I opened my eyes again, it was gone. But I know better now. It didn't leave. It was never gone. It was just waiting, watching. The whispers never stopped. They're in my head now, swirling like the winds of Alaska. The thing is still there, in the shadows of my mind, lurking, waiting for me to slip. And one day I know it will be back. And next time I don't think I'll escape. I don't think anyone will. It's been months since that night. Months since I forced myself to believe I had driven the thing away. But I know now that it was never really gone. I thought the worst was over, but I was wrong. It's never over. The whispers have grown louder, more persistent, pushing their way into my thoughts. The thing, whatever it is, has found a way to stay inside me, like a parasite that feeds on my fear, my exhaustion, my broken mind. It's not just a shadow anymore. It's a part of me, lodged deep within my soul. I can feel it every day, like a weight on my chest. The fear has become familiar. It's like breathing. You don't notice it until you try to stop. I moved to a different town, a different state, trying to outrun it once again. I found a quiet little place in Wyoming, far from Alaska, far from the memories of what I had seen and experienced. But as I walked through the front door of this new apartment, I felt it. The same cold that had settled over me in that cabin. The same suffocating silence. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just imagining things, but I knew deep down that it wasn't true. The thing was here too. It was everywhere. It was inside me. I could feel its presence in the shadows, in the corners of my mind. It didn't take long for the nightmares to return. They were worse than before, more vivid, more real. In my dreams, I would find myself back in those woods, back at that cabin. I would hear the howling, that dreadful sound that rattles your bones. And I would see it, standing there watching me, waiting for me to make the wrong move. Sometimes, I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart pounding, unable to shake the feeling that it was still there, still watching me from the darkness. And then it came again. I was sitting in my apartment, trying to read a book to distract myself from the constant weight in my chest. The storm outside had been howling all night, the wind battering the windows, but I didn't pay it much attention. I'd learned to block out the weather long ago. The real storm was inside me. I heard a knock at the door. It was soft, but it cut through the stillness of the room like a blade. I froze. I didn't want to open the door. Couldn't. I knew what was out there. I knew what was waiting for me, but I couldn't resist. My hand moved of its own accord, trembling as I reached for the doorknob. When I opened it, there was no one there. But something was wrong. The air was cold, colder than it should have been, like a chill was coming from nowhere, like the wind itself had slipped inside my apartment. The silence was oppressive, like the world had suddenly gone still. I stepped outside, into the hallway. And there, at the end of the hallway, standing just beyond the flickering light, was a figure. A tall, gaunt figure, its outline barely visible in the dim light. It was so still that I almost couldn't tell if it was real. The darkness around it seemed to bend, as if the very air itself was afraid to touch it. I knew what it was before I could even see its face. It was the thing. It was here. I took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. My body wanted to run, to escape, but my legs were frozen. I couldn't move. The thing raised its arm, its fingers twisting in the air like they were reaching for something. It didn't need to speak for me to hear it. Its words filled my mind, cold and clear. "You've been running for so long, Ben. You can't hide from me anymore." It was the same voice, the same whispers, but there was something different about it this time. The presence wasn't just around me. It was inside me, too. It was in my thoughts, my very soul, clawing its way out. And then it took a step toward me. Slow, deliberate. The air seemed to warp around it, like the temperature was dropping with each movement. I could feel its coldness, the crushing weight of its presence, pushing me back into the apartment. I tried to scream. I tried to fight, but my body wouldn't obey. It was like I was drowning in the fear it had planted inside me. My thoughts were clouded, filled with terror and the overwhelming sense that I was about to lose everything. I was losing myself. And then I saw something. In the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow, a flicker of movement. It was small at first, but it grew, taking shape, becoming something real. I couldn't process it at first. I thought I was hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there. But then I realized what I was seeing. It was the figure of a man. It was Eric. He was standing there, just outside the apartment, his eyes wide open, staring at me with that same frozen look he had when they found him. His body was pale, his skin stretched tight over his bones. He was dead, but there he was, standing in front of me, like he had never left. I tried to call out to him, but no words came. My throat was tight, suffocated by the weight of the fear that gripped me. And then, Eric's voice echoed in my mind. It wasn't him. It wasn't his voice. It was the thing speaking through him. "You can't escape, Ben," it said, its voice seeping through every thought, every breath. "You are mine." I tried to push it out, tried to shut my mind off, but the whispers wouldn't stop. They were all I could hear, all I could think. I wasn't sure where I ended and the thing began anymore. It was here. It had found me again. It wasn't going to stop. Not until it took me, too. And the worst part? I think it already has. The thing didn't just hunt me. It didn't just chase me through the forests of Alaska, through my nightmares, through the towns I thought were safe. It's been inside me all along, feeding on my fear, feeding on the idea that I could escape it. But it's never been about escape. It's always been about survival. And I don't know how much longer I can survive. I'm writing this now because I'm running out of time. I can feel it closing in on me. The whispers are louder. The cold is deeper. And every breath I take feels heavier, more labored. I can't escape it. I can't outrun it. The thing, whatever it is, has found its way into the very core of me, and I feel it tightening its grip. When I left that apartment, I didn't know what else to do. I had no plan, no destination in mind. I just needed to get away, to put as much distance between myself and whatever this thing was. I thought if I could just outrun it, if I could just keep moving, I might get a little bit of peace. But peace doesn't exist when the thing is following you. It's like a shadow always there, no matter how far you run. It doesn't matter where I go. It knows me. It knows my fears, my thoughts, my weaknesses. I've tried to forget, tried to bury the memories of Alaska, of the cabin, of Eric and Scott. But the thing won't let me forget. It reminds me every single day. I went to a therapist trying to convince myself that it was all just trauma, a figment of my imagination. I thought maybe I was just losing my mind after everything I'd seen. But the moment I sat in that office, the thing was there, lurking in the shadows, just beyond the therapist's smile. Its cold fingers brushed against the back of my neck, and the whispers started. "You can't outrun it," it said. The therapist couldn't hear it. She just smiled, nodding, asking questions. But I couldn't focus on her words. I couldn't hear her over the sound of the whispers, the feeling of something dark, something ancient, wrapping itself tighter around me. That night, I didn't go home, couldn't go back. I couldn't stay in any place long enough to feel safe. So I drove. I didn't know where. I didn't care. I just needed to move. The road stretched out in front of me, endless and dark, the headlights cutting through the night. The snow flurries danced around the truck, swirling like a blizzard. But there was no escape. There was never an escape. Hours passed. The cold inside my truck was unbearable. The heat was on full blast. But it didn't matter. The cold, the real cold, was inside me now. That's when I saw it again. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the flash of something in the distance. Too far to make out clearly, but familiar. Something tall, too tall. I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. But I knew it was the thing. I slammed on the brakes, the truck sliding on the slick road. But I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I had to see. I had to know if I was right. The figure was standing in the middle of the road, just staring at me. Its limbs were outstretched, its form bending in ways that made my stomach twist. Couldn't breathe. I tried to reverse, but my hands wouldn't move. My body was frozen in place. My eyes locked on the thing in the road. It stepped forward, its limbs jerking in unnatural angles, dragging itself closer to the truck. I could see its face now. Its hollow eyes stared at me, cold and vacant. Its mouth didn't move, but the whispers filled my head. "You'll never escape," it said, its voice seeping into my thoughts, making everything else fade away. "I've always been with you." I couldn't think. I couldn't even scream. My heart pounded in my chest, My hands gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The thing was so close now, I could feel its coldness crawling through the air, settling into my bones. I thought it was the end. I thought it was finally going to take me. But then, something strange happened. I wasn't sure if it was a dream or a delusion, but for a moment, I saw a flash of light, a bright, blinding light, and the thing in the road faltered, its form flickering like a broken image on a screen. It froze, just for an instant, like it wasn't sure how to respond. And then it was gone. I don't know how. I don't know why. I didn't waste a second. I floored the gas pedal and drove. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I haven't stopped since. I'm not sure where I am anymore. I don't know where I'm going, but I can feel it. The thing is still here, still with me, lurking in my mind, waiting for me to slip. It's still out there, somewhere in the shadows. I'm not sure how much longer I can keep running. The exhaustion is starting to catch up to me. The whispers are getting louder, more insistent, and I can't escape them. But the worst part? I don't think I want to anymore. The thing isn't just a force of fear. It's a part of me now. It's inside me. It's inside my soul. It feeds on my terror, on my thoughts, on my every move. I don't think it will ever leave, and I don't think I can survive without it. I'm writing this, hoping that somehow, someone will read this, that someone will know what happened. But I fear it's too late. I fear the thing has already taken me. And if you're reading this, know one thing. It's still out there. And it's waiting. I don't know how much longer I can hold onto my mind. Writing this is the last tether I have left to reality. The thing is closer now, closer than it's ever been, and I can feel it growing stronger. The whispers are constant, the cold relentless. I can't escape it no matter how hard I try, no matter how far I run. It's always there, inside me, creeping into my thoughts. I thought that by leaving everything behind, by driving away, running away from the places that haunted me, I could start over. I could outrun it. I could find some peace. But I was wrong. The first time it truly hit me that I couldn't outrun it anymore was when I stopped. I was exhausted, my mind fractured and broken from the constant fear, the constant drive, and for the first time in months, I let myself rest. I found a small motel, a nondescript place off the highway, hoping for a few hours of sleep. The room was empty, save for the bare essentials. A single bed, a flickering lamp, and a cracked window. I didn't care. I just needed to stop, even for a moment. The air inside the room felt heavy, thick with the same suffocating cold that had followed me across the country. But I told myself it was just the winter chill creeping in through the walls. I laid down on the bed, my eyes closing in an attempt to silence the relentless pounding of my heart. But the moment I closed them, I saw it again. It wasn't just the thing, it was the place, the forest. The trees were towering, their branches twisted and warped. The snow beneath my feet was deeper than it had ever been. I could hear the wind howling, the world around me moving in a slow, surreal motion, like I was trapped in some terrible dream. And there it was, standing in the distance, watching me. The thing. Its form stretched tall and skeletal, its black eyes glaring through the darkness. I tried to turn away, tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, unable to escape its gaze. The thing didn't speak, but I heard its voice in my head, clearer than ever. "You'll never leave." The words rattled through my mind like a physical blow. I could feel its cold, bitter presence seeping into every thought, every breath, every nerve. It was suffocating me. It wasn't just the cold of the room now. It was the cold of its touch, freezing every part of me from the inside out. I woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for air, my body trembling. The room was still dark, the only sound the beating of my heart in my ears. But I knew the thing wasn't just in my dreams anymore. It was in my head. It had always been there. I can't escape it. When I looked in the mirror the next morning, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. My face was pale, gaunt, my eyes sunken and hollow. The reflection was a stranger, someone who had been worn down by fear and exhaustion, someone who had given up. But more than that, it was someone who was already lost. I tried to keep moving. I couldn't stay in that motel, but no matter where I went, I could feel it. The thing was always just behind me, never more than a few steps away. Even when I tried to sleep, even when I drove through the night, I could hear it in the back of my mind. I could feel it following me. But something changed on the third day. I woke up in the middle of the night, my body drenched in sweat, the room colder than ever. The whispers had grown louder, as if the thing was pushing its way into my mind, its voice filling every thought. It was too much. I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and stumbled to the bathroom, hoping the cold water would snap me out of whatever nightmare I was in. But when I looked in the mirror, I didn't see my reflection. I saw it. The thing was standing behind me, its face twisted and grotesque, its hollow eyes staring at me through the reflection. It wasn't just watching me anymore. It was inside the mirror, reaching out to me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The thing's hand, cold and skeletal, reached toward me, and I could feel its fingers brush against my neck. I wanted to pull away, to run, but I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. "You can't escape, Ben," it whispered. "You never could." I don't know how long I stood there, frozen in place, feeling its cold touch seeping into my skin, into my bones. But I know I can't fight it anymore. The thing is inside me now, more than just a shadow following me. It's in my mind, in my thoughts, in every heartbeat. It's a part of me. I don't know what it wants from me. I don't know what it's been waiting for, but I can feel its hunger. I can feel its patience. It's not in a hurry. It doesn't need to rush. And that's what terrifies me most, because I've already lost. I'm writing this because I don't know how much longer I'll be able to. The thing is stronger now, its presence overwhelming, and I feel like I'm losing myself. I can't fight it anymore. The fear, the darkness, it's all consuming. If you're reading this, please know that I'm not insane. I'm not just some delusional man running from his past. There is something out there. There is something in the darkness, and it will follow you just like it followed me. It doesn't matter where you go. It doesn't matter how far you run. It will always find you. Found me, and now it's going to take me. And once it does, there's no coming back. I'm writing this because I can't let it win. Not without leaving something behind. Not without someone knowing the truth. But I know now. It doesn't matter. The thing has won. And now it's time for me to go. I never expected to see another day. The thing, it's inside me, twisting and warping my mind until I'm not sure what's real anymore. I'm losing myself, losing everything. The thing whispers constantly, urging me to give in, to stop fighting, to embrace it. But I can't. Even though the darkness is pulling me in, even though I feel it tightening its grip around my chest and my thoughts, there's still something inside of me fighting back. A small part of me that refuses to let go, that refuses to become what it wants me to be. A part of me that is still trying to survive. I don't know how much longer I have. The thing is growing stronger, and I feel myself slipping further into its grasp. I've been driving for hours, lost in a haze, not even sure where I am anymore. The snow is falling heavily outside, blanketing everything in white, but it feels like the storm inside me is much worse. I don't even know what day it is, but I can feel the end coming. I can feel it in the cold that wraps around me, in the whispers that fill my mind. The thing is getting closer. It's closer than ever before, and I can't escape it. I don't know how much longer I can keep running. The road is endless. I've been driving through this frozen landscape for what feels like days. The world outside is just white, a blur of snow and shadows, the headlights of my truck barely cutting through the storm. It feels like I'm trapped in some endless nightmare, where time doesn't exist and the only thing that matters is the thing that is hunting me. But then something changes. I see it. In the distance, at the edge of the road, there's a shape, a figure standing there still and silent in the storm. I can barely make it out through the snow, but I know what it is. I know who it is. It's the thing. But something's different this time. It's not the same twisted form I've seen before. This time it's standing still, not moving, just waiting. It doesn't approach me. It doesn't whisper to me. It's just there. I stop the truck. I don't know why. I shouldn't stop. I should drive past it, keep going, but something pulls me toward it. Maybe it's curiosity. Maybe it's desperation. Maybe I'm just tired of running. I step out of the truck, the snow biting at my skin, and I walk toward it. The storm rages around me, but the figure remains still, unmoving, as if it's waiting for me. The whispers are deafening now, echoing in my head, urging me to turn back, to leave. But I can't. I reach the thing, and as I stand there, face to face with it, I realize something. It's not what I thought it was. It's me. Not physically, not exactly, but it's a part of me. A part of my soul, a piece of my fear. It's not an outside force, a thing that hunts. It's the reflection of my darkest self, a shadow that I've been running from, a part of me that I can never escape. You've been running from me, it says, its voice no longer a whisper but a deep, cold truth. But I'm you, Ben. I've always been you. I stand there in the snow, staring at it, at myself, and in that moment, everything clicks into place. The thing isn't some monstrous entity from the woods. It's the manifestation of all the fear, all the darkness that I've carried with me. It's the part of me that I've tried to bury, to outrun. It's the part of me that thrives on fear, on the belief that I can't survive. It's the part of me that never stopped hunting. I don't know how long I stand there, lost in this realization. But when I look around, I see the snow has stopped falling. The storm is gone. The world is still. And for the first time in a long time, I feel calm. The thing isn't out there. It's never been out there. It's been inside me all along. And now that I understand that, now that I see it for what it truly is, the battle is over. There's no more running, no more escaping. I can't fight it anymore because I've realized the truth. The thing I've been running from is me. As I stand in the silence of the snow, the world around me still and frozen, I accept it. The thing, my fear, my darkness, is a part of me. It always has been. And no matter how far I run, no matter where I go, it will always be there, inside me. I'm not sure if I'm free now or if I've just come to terms with my fate, but I know this, the thing never really hunted me. It didn't need to. I was the one hunting myself all along. And now, as I walk back to my truck, I feel a strange peace settling over me. The fear is still there, but it no longer controls me, because I've finally stopped running. And for the first time, I think I've come to understand something terrifying. I was never meant to escape. I was meant to survive. And that survival is with me forever. I don't know how long I've been out here. Time has become a blur, like the snow that surrounds me, like the whispers in my head that refuse to quiet. I no longer know what day it is or even where I am. I've stopped caring. There's no point anymore. The thing, it's still with me, but it's different now. It's not just a shadow or a force outside of me. It's part of me, a piece of my soul, a dark reflection of everything I've ever feared, everything I've ever wanted to escape. And I've come to understand that there is no running from it. There never was. I've spent so long convincing myself that if I just kept moving, kept running, I could outrun my past, outrun my mistakes, outrun the fear that has clung to me like a second skin. But it's always been here, inside me, feeding on the very thing I've tried to escape, my own darkness. That realization came to me the moment I stood face to face with it. My fear, my reflection. It was never a monster. It was never something external. It was me. I am the thing. I don't know if I'm still in my own mind, if this is some kind of twisted dream, or if I've crossed over into a place where time no longer has meaning. I think perhaps that I'm no longer part of the world I once knew. I've become a part of the wilderness I tried to escape, the frozen, desolate place where shadows live and where no one truly survives. But now I don't need to survive anymore. I've stopped fighting. The battle was never about escaping the thing. The battle was about accepting it, accepting myself. I hear the howling wind again, but this time it doesn't scare me. The whispers are louder, but they no longer terrify me. They're my own thoughts now, my own fears, and I've learned to embrace them. The cold in my bones has become familiar, almost comforting. I feel it seeping through my skin into my soul, and I realize that the thing, it is me. The darkness in me has always been there, just waiting for me to acknowledge it. The more I fought it, the more it thrived. But now that I've stopped running, now that I've finally stopped fighting, the coldness is not so terrifying. It's just there, just like me. I'm standing in the middle of the road, lost in the snow, and I can't help but wonder if anyone will ever find me. But I don't care. The thing is part of me, and I've finally accepted it. I've stopped fearing it. I realize now that I was never supposed to outrun the thing. I was supposed to understand it. I was supposed to let it in, to stop running from the dark corners of my own soul. The thing doesn't control me anymore. It never did. It was always a reflection of my own fear, my own failures, my own brokenness. I know I'll never be free of it. I don't think anyone ever truly is. We all have our shadows, our darkness, waiting to consume us if we let it. But that's not the end of the story, because survival isn't about outrunning it. Survival is about living with it. And so, as I stand here in the snow, with the whispers and the cold pressing in on me, I don't fight it. I don't try to run. I simply exist, a part of the very thing I once feared, and I accept it. I accept myself. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only way to survive this. Maybe the thing never wanted to take me. Maybe it only wanted me to see the truth. That it's not the thing outside of us that we need to fear. It's the thing within. And once you accept it, once you stop fighting, you can finally stop running. And maybe, just maybe, you can find peace in the darkness. But that peace comes with a price. I paid it long ago.